Hello, everyone. My name is Aubrey, and I'm here to talk to you today about Aloe For Burnout, a practical guide to flying too close to the sun. Once again, I'm Aubrey. I am a trans lesbian Latina running a freelance game studio called FlyingCatStudios, and I do games related tools and gameplay engineering and work on my own indie games on the side. I've gotten some grant projects like funding for Goddess Grotto, which sits at the intersection of sex education and art therapy. And I have some funding for a new untitled project. I before I opened my studio, I worked in AAA on NASCAR games, making them more trans inclusive with a trans inclusive character creator, gender as a spectrum character creator, where I championed single model techniques for diverse characters. But along the way, I burned out pretty strong. And I've been finding ways to heal and prevent further burnout ever since then. So today, I would love to talk to y'all about my journey and recovery and what I learned to make it a little better for all of you. Okay, so if y'all are comfortable and you don't need the subtitles, we are going to take a little moment for ourselves. And so if you're comfortable and don't need the subtitles, you can feel free to let your eyes drift closed. If you do need the subtitles, that's completely fine. And you can just let your gaze soften a little bit and just focus on the subtitles as I walk us through this. I'd like you to just focus inward and tune in to your breath. Not trying to change it, just seeing where you're at right now. Noticing where you might be holding a little bit of tension. Maybe send a little bit of breath to those spots that need a little bit of extra love. We often don't take time to sit with ourselves and check in and see how we're doing. But it can be really important. So we're doing that now before we talk about such a highly emotionally charged topic. If you feel comfortable, I'd like you to imagine a moment when you felt a lot of overwhelm or maybe all the way into burnout. It could be work or school. It could be from at home and family. You're in a safe space here. We're walking through it together. We're just trying to get a sense of what our own story feels like so that we have an anchor as we go through this journey. Now notice as you're thinking about this and feeling through this feeling, where you might be holding some extra tension now. And maybe send a little bit more breath there. Relaxing on your exhales, letting the tension melt out a little bit. And now we're going to take a big inhale in through our nose and sigh it out through our mouth. And one more, in through the nose. And sigh it out. And as you feel comfortable, you can start to blink your eyes back open, come back into the space. Welcome back. Now, each of our struggles is a little bit different. And I want you to know that your experience is valid no matter what. My experience is going to be very different from yours, and it may be very similar. I want you, if you feel comfortable, to try and anchor this talk in your own experience and look at my talk and my experiences through the lens of your story. So as I share with you today, just keep in mind what you felt here and see how it applies to your story, or if there are unique parts that you still need to investigate. That is your own story. Okay, so my first games industry job, I got to design a character creator. And it turned out pretty similar to most other character creators. At the time, I was focused on doing well at my industry job, and I ended up making something that had a gender binary and a handful of customization options that made some pretty generic characters. I wasn't out yet, and I was trying to accept my trans identity privately, doing that work on my own. So when it was time to redesign, I got really excited because by that time I had come out. I was publicly transitioning. I got to really consider what I wanted as a trans woman out of this particular feature. And so I imagined creating gender as a spectrum in a character creator. And what that looked like for me was a single character model with multiple blend shapes and an androgynous base model. The blend shapes would be masculine, feminine, and non-binary, and you'd be allowed to scale up from the base to the full blend shape, creating more of what I felt was an actual spectrum of choices, and allowed you to create some really creative characters. Because you could change this independent of gender, there wasn't really any need for gender picking in the game. So I actually removed it from the code and protected the game from future binary categorizations. But this feature, although very diverse, didn't get greenlit because of its inclusivity. It got greenlit because of the improvements and efficiency and variety and ease of maintenance, as well as fixing all of the pain points of the people who were making it, the artists and the engineer. I ended up being the only person who was strongly supporting the diversity of this. And so a lot of my energy went into fixing anything that went awry, protecting the feature, and just really making sure that it lived up to what I imagined it would be. And I was also responsible for career mode, which was a major box feature. And I was competing in roller derby, which is a very physical sport, and I was learning to become a yoga teacher. And on top of all of that, I was transitioning, which in its own right can create burnout. There's a whole new set of things and a whole new set of experiences that are all happening at once. Now, it wasn't the first time that I had ever experienced burnout, but it was clear that I was waist deep in burnout. I had done 80-hour weeks before for grad school, and That was not any fun. But this time, instead of just feeling exhausted, I couldn't feel the desire to do anything creative at all, or even relaxing. Like, I slept all the time and nothing felt good, and I was in a really dark place for a really long time. I kept doing the things that I had already committed to, but I felt really stuck and I didn't know how to get any better. I did some research and I tried my best to just keep moving forward, but most of what I did was I started saying no to things. I continued with what I had already committed to, but I said no to anything new, and I created a lot of white space for myself. I actually felt really guilty about how much white space I was creating because it felt like I should be able to do this. But that just wasn't the case, and when you're burnt out, any extra and even the regular amount can feel like a monumental task. And so creating and holding the space felt really important, and so I just did that, and I healed a little bit at a time. It was slow going, and the only thing that felt good was when a friend taught me how to do some knitting. I picked a project, a scarf that I made, a simple black and yellow scarf, and knitted it in the round so I could just keep going along with my knit stitch. And it was a simple, repetitive task that allowed me to be a little bit creative and see the progress happen. And slowly I started to heal. It reduced my anxiety. I felt like I could breathe. I started being interested in watching shows with my wife and spending more time with her. And I eventually got to the place where I wanted to draw again. Some friends were doing some art for fun, and I started doing doodles and started doing more digital art, and it felt really good to make things again. And so it felt like I was starting to recover more significantly. This all happened over like a 6 months to a year process. And eventually, after I was drawing a bunch, I did a game jam and was an artist in a game jam, and it felt like I could create again. And it felt like I was healing. I took a back seat at work during that time. I let other people push my projects forward and kind of just followed for a bit. And that felt good. And even after I did that, even after I healed, I didn't take all of that responsibility back on because it just felt like too much too soon. Eventually, I felt strong enough that I could give some more talks. So I did a talk at a conference outside my own state at Game Devs of Color. It filled me with so much energy sharing my process creating a trans inclusive character creator and how I greenlit that process. When I actually gave the talk, so many people came up to me afterwards and were really engaging in some really important ways. They were interested in using my techniques and their games and using what I had talked about in so many really cool ways. And I had mentioned this to many of my trans friends, and as I talked about making this trans character creator, they were very interested in making and experiencing the games and genres that they had never been interested in experiencing before, just so that they could feel seen in this trans character creator in a game that they otherwise wouldn't play. And you all know how that feels when you've been left out for a really long time and finally someone makes a game where you feel seen in. It means so much, so deep inside you, and it was clear that I was doing important things. And not only was I doing them, but it was really important to share the work I had done and to talk about it with folks who would find it interesting. After that talk, my friend encouraged me to apply for a grant. This would be the grant that would fund the Goddess Grotto prototype. And I had a lot going on at the time. I was recovering from bottom surgery, but I spoke with them about wanting to make a space where you could explore your sexuality as a garden. And they were adamant that this seemed like a really good fit for the grant that was being offered through the Minnesota State Arts Board. And through their consistent support and encouragement, I submitted an application to the grant, even though I was really tired from recovering from surgery. And I won it. This small amount of money that they gave me to make this art and the little bit of accountability and commitment that I had made to this felt like I had enough to actually push me forward to make something that the world needed. And not because it would make me money, but specifically because it just needed to exist. Goddess Grotto sits at the intersection of art therapy and sex education. It holds space for you to define what your sexuality looks like as a garden and what that means to you. My wife and I played around with the idea of making complex systems about the underlying behaviors of and mechanics of our desire systems. We were very inspired by Emily Nagoski's work, Come As You Are, and her metaphor of sexuality as a garden, and wanted to make an interactive thing. But an early prototype and an early paper prototype showed us something really different. We gave folks pre-drawn vulvas, plants, and art supplies with the prompt, imagine your sexuality as a garden. And we were met with such deep engagement that we knew we were on to something. Many of the folks took 10 to 30 minutes just to ponder the prompt and see what it meant to them. They described deep metaphors and how they represented it in their art, and they crafted gardens with intentional meaning to them. Many expressed never having space to consider this, and it was clear that this was something new, something special. Shortly after that happened, we went into lockdown, and the digital gallery space that we thought we were creating for kind of evaporated. There was no way we were going to be able to show our work in an enclosed space with a bunch of people. And so with all of the pandemic came all of the burnout feels. They came back multiplied. I had thought that I had healed from everything, but it turns out that burnout takes like 4 to 5 years to heal, and that's if you're just resting. And clearly none of us can just rest when we live in the societies that we live in. I shifted to making the digital prototype different than I originally imagined, and just tried to embody that paper prototype to capture the same feel that we had that magical day. I drew a variety of vulvas to help people feel comfortable identifying with whatever body parts they had in whatever presentation they were there. I drew a bunch of plants that could be arranged like stickers around the vulvas, and I gave folks the same prompt. We invited people who were outside the games industry to come experience it, and we were so delighted to see a similar level of engagement with deep, meaningful metaphors that people put into their work. The big problem with Goddess Grotto, though, was dealing with how to bring this art project to market. Did the world clearly need this? Yes. But the mobile market was complicated. Despite mobile being the right platform, explicit content policies made it hard to go to market, let alone talk about it or even make a audience for this little art project. I ended up writing a talk on making space for different content and applying for a grant to make a new platform to sell Goddess Grotto. And as I was writing this grant application, my friend asked me why I felt like I needed to be the one to make this market. And I pondered that for a while, and it turns out that because I am a trans lesbian of color, my needs aren't the same as a cis heterosexual white man who this industry was built for. I'm going to have to build new paths and overcome barriers of status quo and stigma and lack of visibility along the way. And not only do I have to do that, but I have a much higher risk of burnout because of it. And the story is probably very similar for all of you. I imagine that you have to create spaces for all of your work to really be seen. The thing is that we are often making space for our own authentic experiences to be seen. This, at its core, is what making games and art is about to me. To do this well, I've been unlearning the process of the industry and our colonized society to create my own process. I have a collection of self-care routines, such as yoga, journaling, meditation, a magic practice, roller skating, fiber arts, and hobbies that just fill me with energy. There are too many for me to put into a regular practice that would be repeated every day, which is everything that I've ever read about burnout. So I tune into my intuition. I have a tarot practice to develop that intuition and really listen to my deep feels and figure out what I need in order to move forward in the moment. My internal experience is without pictures or words, so I find ways to externally process those feelings I get, and I try and make sense of them. I am working when I feel ready to do so and doing what I can in between to facilitate that readiness. I cook good meals. I cultivate a strong sleep practice with a healthy amount of naps. I run my own business to have control over my schedule and the kinds of projects who get my energy. I choose the people who I work with and reduce the friction of dissonance in my day job. Mostly, I facilitate the creation of the art to let it flow freely through me. I'm still figuring it out, and that's okay. Building new paths takes time, and patience, and kindness. So I show up every day, and I get a little closer to understanding what it looks like to cultivate a life where all my needs are met, so I can do the work I feel called to do. Your practices are going to look different from mine. Some of them might be the same. Hopefully, what I've shared here can help you along in that process. But you may need to discover your own processes too. I want you to remember that when you're feeling burnout, know that that is part of the process of exploitation that is built into the current system. It is not the way, nor is it our way. We get to discover our own way and cultivate our own process free from harm to ourselves and others. Our work changes those who we touch, bringing authenticity and inspiration to those who feel left out. But we have to cultivate the paths so we can continue to create. Otherwise, burnout's going to consume us. If you are in the midst of burnout, please know that you are not alone. You can reach out to others, people who have been through the process, people who maybe can support you. You do not have to go through it alone, and know that we're here for you. Remember to reduce the load and find what still feels good and focus on that. It's not selfish to focus on yourself. And even if it is, you get to prioritize yourself. That's okay. Focus on what still feels good. The other parts will come. You got this. I believe in you. Y'all are going to change the world for the better. Thanks.